Hey, what's up guys? How's it going? It's Dakota Virshman, and today we're going to talk about kind of why you don't want to accept turf quests. It's a very common thing that almost anybody does, but you'll notice, alright, why is this important? Alright, now, I would like to point out, now, regardless of really who you are, whether you're just somebody that is trying to be a Titan, or a trap account, or a wall trap, or really anyone for that matter, part of the reason why you don't want to accept turf quests is because when you accept a very high level, really, if anything, just accept any turf quest for that matter, you're adding might to your account. Now, here's the thing. When you add that might to your account, it's going to make your account look a lot bigger, over time. Like, eventually, you're going to have a lot of excess might. Now, if you want to know actually how to find that, you want to click on this little tab up here on the left, and then in here, it will actually distribute your might in relation to troops, traps, buildings, quests, research, player level, hero armies, and familiars. Now, for the most part, right, the one thing that most people kind of look over and don't pay too much attention to is their quest might. But the problem is, if you accept a lot of quests like I have, you're going to have about 53-ish million worth of quest might, which could have been converted over into troops. Now, I would argue that anybody to everybody should know that, obviously, if you continue to research in the game, that's unavoidable. Getting 363 million research might like I am is just kind of where I am in the game, and I can't do much about it. But if you're out there and you're wanting to be a trap account, the one thing you absolutely do not want to do is you want to give yourself a lot of excess might. So a lot of the time, trap accounts out there will destroy all of their buildings for the most part, aside from the ones that they have to keep. And it pretty much keeps their building might as low as possible. And like player level and hero armies, I mean, player level is kind of an unavoidable, you can't really mess with it too much. But like hero armies, you can almost certainly avoid it. Just in part from basically only leveling certain heroes. So, if you're not tiering, every hero you have in your possession, really, that's one way of avoiding adding a lot of might there. But again, with traps, now that's just your wall. So for wall traps, that's unavoidable. But for people that are just, wanting to be a trap account for that matter, then really the majority of your effort's going to be put into troop might. Now, when it comes to actually going about, like, garrison trapping, for example, one thing that I would like to suggest to anybody is that if you are someone that wants to build up a successful garrison trap, you want to be able to build up an account that has an enormous amount of resources that you can store on it. And that means you need to be able to shield that account for quite a duration of time. Now, in my case, I don't get rallied really because of my might, and also in part because of the troop count that I have and the gear that I possess and I wear on a regular basis. But for the average person, if you're able to hyper in, say, like stone, timber, and you essentially, or even food for that matter, and you store it on the same account, essentially you're going to build up a reservoir of resources that you can then turn around and you can use it on for yourself, but also down the road you can use that account as a garrison trap, and you can basically port that account around, have people attack it, send your garrison, wait for another march, and then zip the guy and take his leader if he sends it, and so forth. Now, if you're out there and you're wanting to like build, like a solo trap, or you're wanting to build like a rally trap, or any of the versions out there, alright, I want to kind of just specify kind of what I've done. And again, alright, it's going to be different for everybody, but essentially in my case, right, I'm 750 million might, so I'm not going to pay attention to my might. Like, it's unavoidable in my case. But for the average player, if you're out there and you're wanting to be like a solo trap, for example, a lot of people, being that they only have access to the infantry phalanx, are going to build anywhere from like 1.2 million to 2.5 million tier 2 for their front line. And then they usually do about 3 to 4, maybe even 6 million or so tier 1 archers and cataphracts. And that's essentially all a solo trap has to have, really, aside from having your gear up to par, right? And then you're also going to need to have most of your research and the military branch, for that matter, at level 9. So essentially, it's just right before you start getting to tier 4. So essentially, you're going to be right below, 10 on offenses are great if you can get them, but if you're, at 8 or 9, you could still manage. It's not as bad. But, again, going back into the fact that, like, when it comes to solo traps, that's kind of the gist of what they're doing. Now, rally traps, there's kind of like two philosophies out there, and there's kind of two ways to go about doing it. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of briefly go over both. All right, so the first type of rally trap out there is the most common one, which was essentially you did 2 million tier 2 across, and then you did 1.5 million tier 4 across. This is a really common method, and it worked pretty well for quite a while, and people still use it to this day. But another method that very few people are noticing that actually works is you can actually go about, say, like building 3 million tier 2 across and then 3 million tier 3 across. And this method actually works just about as well. Now, why I point this out is, so if I were to go about like building 5 million tier 3 as a front line, right? In theory, this really shouldn't actually do as bad because that should be able to eat a rally. Part of why that, like when it comes to tier 3 in particular, why people don't like to use tier 2 and tier 3, as a front line, for example, is because part of the problem is that if you dip into your tier 2 and you say, like, some people out there, they're trying to eat quad rallies and doubles and triples. And the problem is that if let's suppose you get in sync 1 or 2 rallies at the same time, you're going to take reds. And so if you've only got maybe 1 million or so, that might completely crush your front line. Like, you might wind up losing 1 million plus tier 2 in a single rally. Like, it's not really uncommon, especially if you're not in counter. Like, it's gonna hurt really bad if you're being countered. And part of what happens is if you had like 3 rallies, for example, they crush that first front line, then they're gonna dip into your tier 3, and your tier 3 are gonna die just as fast. And it's not pretty. And so a lot of the time people don't like to use tier 3 for this reason, because once you start losing reds in tier 3, you're gonna lose a lot of damage really fast. And that's really counterintuitive. So a lot of the time, I would think, at least in my opinion, if you would have started out and known this in advance, right, you would probably be able to get away with building like 10 million tier 2 in my case, right? And you would have 3, 4, maybe even 5 million tier 3. But if you did this in advance, and I'm saying this from the beginning, right, and you had been dedicated and had played the game and had this one goal in mind, then yeah, it would not be as bad as it would be. And I say that because it's your might, mostly. If you can get away with it, that's what makes some of the best trap accounts in the game, is because they've pretty much dedicated themselves to that one particular practice and have avoided any excess might and research might as possible. Now, having that said, right, if you're going to be able to, go about trapping that way, it's dangerous, but it works. And I honestly, myself, I've always kind of thought about doing it. And then maybe I will, I don't know. But something that you can also do, and it works just as great, is you can actually go about, say, like 6, 7, maybe even 800,000 tier 4 across, and then just do 3 to 4 million tier 2. And I like that method because it gives you a lot of buffer room. There's nothing really too bad about it, because essentially your damage rate it's not so great, right? But you've got enough buffer in your tier 2 that if you do end up taking 3 hits in a row, you're not gonna lose a heck of a lot of tier 4 for that matter. You're gonna lose tier 2, that's inevitable, okay? But you kind of give yourself that buffer that you need to be able to avoid taking a lot of like tier 4 reds for that matter. So something that I do know about when it comes to actually rally trapping in itself, right, is that, if let's say you got 2, maybe even 3 million tier 4, it does significantly increase your, like, your overall potential. Like, if that was your front line, for example, let's say you've got 3 million tier 4 for front line, and you don't have any tier 2 whatsoever, The major benefit of it is that you're gonna have a lot of morale. The problem being is that you're then probably gonna take reds, and so it's always kind of a question of, well, okay, so if tier 2 are nothing more than a buffer, the same way that tier 3 can be used as a buffer when you're sending solo attacks, how exactly and why exactly does no one use tier 1? Well, because part of the reason why no one's using tier 1 in rally traps is because the morale that it drops is just ridiculous. Like, it will just so quickly drop the morale that it doesn't really do what you want it to do, Like, it eventually kind of, it goes downhill really fast. I mean, I think really part of the reason why no one uses tier 1, It's like, although you in solo traps, it's fantastic because that gives you like a quick auto heal. It's really easy and fast because you don't have any time between the troops healing, right? But it's a real serious problem when you're trying to actually rally trap, because you're just going to wind up filling your infirm, and then essentially all your tier 2 are just going to die, and it's very counterintuitive, I guess. For what you put into it, you wind up losing more than you gain out of it, and that's really kind of not what we want to do. So at least in regards to rally trapping, that's kind of the gist of that. But when it comes to like garrison trapping, I know a handful of people are always wondering, like, okay, so if you're gonna go ahead and you're gonna garrison somebody, like, what exactly do you do? How does it work? And I know that a lot of people get confused on this, and again, I've said it before, you always want to send the garrison prior to the attack. You don't want to have the garrison after the attack, because if you random after the attack, all that's going to happen is you're going to they're going to hit your castle, and your garrison will then random to it after the fact, which is counterintuitive to what you want it to do, right? Which is to say that you want it to actually random first into the castle, then eat the attack, and that way you get your report back that you actually successfully killed the garrison, or lost, depending on whether or not you are checking what is being sent at you and you're countering it, right? But for the most part, if you've done everything I've said up to this point in terms of troop count and stuff, that's pretty much it. It's really all there is to it. Now, I hope it kind of helps alleviate some of the questions that you guys have had out there about the troop counts and stuff. But if not, I hopefully kind of gave you at least some idea of what to look at. Now, if you're wanting to know more about the gear, I mean, again, it really kind of boils down to stats. A lot of rally traps are like pushing 350% across, maybe even as high as 400-ish%. But your solo traps and stuff like that are trying to do anywhere from 120 to 200%, maybe higher if they can, like 250. Your garrison traps, it's more about, can you get like 3, 4, or 500% into one unit stat, because you're trying to do as much damage in that one unit type. So, again, these are just the little things that, I hope it kind of gives you some idea of what to look at. If you're someone that's trying to wall trap, I mean, again, wall trapping isn't like, it's not brain dead science by any means. You're just trying to increase your wall defense and your trap attack. It's nothing more than that. And if you're struggling with a wall trap, all you need to do is get your wall research completed, and then once you have, you're pretty much set for life. Like, once you have that set up, you can eat solos, and people aren't going to be able to get through you until they send like 2 or 3 marches in a row. Because what'll happen is your first march will burn or smoke, and then your second march will actually do damage. So it's just something you got to be really mindful of, and that's the only problem I have with a wall trap, really. It's useful if you can use it in tandem with some stuff, but otherwise, I really didn't end up liking a wall trap when I was actually playing with it. It's nice, it works, but it's not as effective as I would have liked it to be. But needless to say, if you're starting out and you want to be able to like build up and actually get to somewhere, I really do recommend that you guys keep up with, here pretty soon we're going to have, you've got Guild Fest, you got KBK, you've got events like these that come around, and I really think if you're doing it right, you should be saving your speed ups and doing these kind of hell events where you're going to get extra gems. I mean, if you're doing that, I think you'll end up doing just fine. And again, if you're somebody with Holy Stars, the reason why you save your Holy Stars is for this event. All right, you save it for this event, and that's literally the only thing that I would recommend for people out there that are just wanting to know, like, when I should ever spend my Holy Stars. I would spend it on that event. I don't even care if it's, is it a monster-based labyrinth or not. I've seen more people win during that event than I have any time at all. But having that said, I hope you guys join me to the next video, and I'll see you guys next time.